Hello, Zero family. I'm Ali Manson, our veterans prostate cancer lead here at Zero, and I'm joined by Paul Taylor. Paul's a Zero champion, a former board member, a retired Army colonel. And Paul, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for being a dedicated prostate cancer advocate, and thank you for your service. It's Veterans Day week.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, not just with you, Ali, but with the whole Zero family. Zero has been an important part of my life since I was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer back in July of 2012. And so I was exposed to Zero. At the time, I was in the military and I was restationed into the Washington, D.C. area. I met the folks at Zero, and I've been loving my experience with the group ever since then. And it's been an important part of my journey as well. So it's important, I think, to give back, but also the network that I've been exposed to of other patients and caregivers and people that care about prostate cancer, as well as helping me increase my understanding of what's going on medically with Zero has been not just, I think, good for me, but also has allowed me to be smarter about treatment decisions that I've made throughout the course of my prostate cancer journey. And I owe a lot of that to Zero. And so I'm happy to be here with my Zero family.
Thanks, Paul. You know, your story, first of all, I'm so glad we've gotten our hooks in you in so many ways. But your story reminds me why we're so committed to working on behalf of veterans with prostate cancer. And that's why we're here today, right? We did a survey this summer of veterans so that we could better understand their prostate cancer awareness, their experiences with diagnosis, treatment, survivorship. We had over 1,500 responses from veterans in all 50 states. And one of the things I think was really interesting is that we had the opportunity to ask veterans without prostate cancer what they knew about prostate cancer, right? If their doctor had talked to them about their risk, if they'd had a PSA test or a DRE. And I really think it was one of the most promising learnings from the study. About 70% of veterans without prostate cancer had had a PSA or DRE, and a slightly smaller number, recognized that was in fact, part of a conversation about prostate cancer risk. And Paul, before you were diagnosed, had your doctor ever talked to you about prostate cancer risk? We do know veterans are diagnosed at a higher rate, veterans and active duty military, than the general population.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, veterans are actually diagnosed at double the rate of the general population in the United States, which is really significant when you think about it. I don't think we understand all the reasons for that. But, I think the survey and the other work that we're doing with Zero and other advocacy groups are going to help inform our way forward and hopefully figure out why that is. I was diagnosed while I was serving on active duty, and I continue to receive treatment now that I'm retired from the Army. But yeah, no one, and I even had a family history. My father has prostate cancer, but it was just one of those things that we never talked about, right? And I think he was under active surveillance, right? He has very slow moving prostate cancer. He'll probably never have to worry about it in his lifetime. So it was not something that was ever discussed. It probably should have been. And so when I went to the doctor, the only reason that I found out about my prostate cancer was because I was in the military. And at the time, when you turn 40, they made everyone do a PSA check. Now, I wish that was that way for the normal population as well, because if I had not had that blood work done, I would not have found out that my PSA was 22 at the time, which is extremely elevated. And I wouldn't have been able to take action. And the reality is, even finding out about it at that point, my cancer was already metastatic. So, early testing is better. I wish that most people were in the situation where when they turned 40, they could get a PSA check or even thought about it. But I had no idea. It was just something that my doctor did at the time. And then, even then, it was hard to have a discussion. At the place where I was first treated and diagnosed, I wasn't given good information, in fact. And as I got smarter about this disease that I had just been diagnosed with, I realized that that was not a place I wanted to be. I wanted to be somewhere where the doctor was more interactive. The whole care team was more interactive with not just me, but my wife as well, and where we could evaluate all of the options that were available to me. So I left and I got a second opinion, and I found a place that I was more comfortable with, that took a more active role in educating, where I could ask all the questions that I needed to ask, and they were a little bit more patient with me. But that was my journey. But you're right. I think that a lot of people have similar circumstances where they don't talk about it growing up. They don't talk about the risk with their doctor, even before they're diagnosed. And even at diagnosis, sometimes men still have difficulty communicating with their care team about what the true risk is involved with a prostate cancer diagnosis.
And what we found in the survey was that veterans who didn't have prostate cancer were more likely to report talking to their doctors about risk than those who'd already been diagnosed, which I think is interesting. And if we're lucky, that reflects changing mores, right? That people who were diagnosed earlier and have already been through prostate cancer, their doctors weren't talking as much, but now doctors are. If we're not lucky, it's just a fluke in how people are reporting. But we do have further analysis going on to better understand some of that. And I said, though, that about 70% of veterans without prostate cancer had a prostate cancer screening. That means 30% didn't, right? So 70% is a very low D, right? About 80% of those who were diagnosed with prostate cancer were diagnosed like you were, Paul, during a routine screening, right? They didn't have symptoms, they didn't know. And so if we're thinking about the 30% of veterans who aren't having any sort of prostate cancer screening, they almost surely have some cases in there, right, that would be discovered through more routine screening.
No one should ever end up like me. That's the goal, right? The goal is to discover prostate cancer before it becomes metastatic, because guess what? Prostate cancer is very curable when you find it in its infancy. But if there's no routine testing, if there's no discussion with men about the risks so that you can inform that discussion and understand that, listen, a PSA test is just a little bit invasive because they have to stick a needle in your arm and get some blood. But I would much rather have regular PSA checks and understand what my status was and establish a baseline early on than wind up in a situation like me or many, many, many men who are diagnosed with metastatic prostate cancer. Because at that point, the world is changing. I was diagnosed almost 10 years ago. And, I've been very fortunate, very lucky, very blessed to have responded well to treatment. But the reality is that getting diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer is still a very dangerous situation for men. And if we can avoid that through early testing, it seems like a no-brainer to me.
Hear, hear. I think that's definitely true. I also think we got some heartening things out of the survey, right? Most veterans with prostate cancer reported reasonable levels of satisfaction with their care journey. And that held true whether they were inside or outside of the VA, which I also think is pretty good, right? It means we're seeing pretty comparable care on both sides. It was only a 75% average satisfaction rate. So again, we can talk about whether that's room for improvement, but maybe we should talk about room for improvement a little bit. You've had access to a number of, I think, innovative treatment options, but in general, among veterans, some of the more newer, higher tech, more precision medicine oriented options have fairly low uptake.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I was diagnosed, like I said, in 2012. And around that time, there had been several new treatments that were just approved. And so the treatment world is really changing. Well, in the last 9 or so years since I was diagnosed, it's continued to change very quickly. And the reality is that there are a lot of very good trials out there. Trials are not scary. People think that, if you go to a trial, then you're not, if you're part of a controlled population, you're not going to receive treatment, and that might be dangerous. There's this thought out there that you're running a risk, but the reality is that most trials either receive standard of care, which you would be receiving anyhow more than likely, or whatever the new form of treatment is that they're testing against the standard of care. So I would encourage, just like I encourage discussions of early testing for all men, once you're diagnosed, I would encourage you to be very aggressive with your care team about discussing clinical trial options. I always advocate too. There's lots of good treatment facilities across the country that you can go to. And certainly availing yourself of treatment within the VA system or a military medical facility or any good facility. But generally, there are some facilities that are actually participating in research and trials. Those are good facilities for people to be at, not just veterans, but anyone with prostate cancer, because you're going to be able to access those trials a little bit easier. But your doctor should be able to give you that advice as well. And even if you end up having to travel a little bit, why not take advantage of it? If there's no risk to you, I've known people that had remarkable results because of trials that they participated in. It's not always going to be that way. But if you're not running another risk, why not take advantage of the trial system? But a lot of people do not, and it's unfortunate.
Well, I think a lot of people, their doctors don't even bring it up, right? I think, and even if your doctor brings it up, you may not be eligible, right? Clinical trials typically have very specific parameters for who's a candidate, but there's no harm in finding out, right? And having that conversation with your doctor and asking if it's a possibility.
I've always been a big advocate, and I've been fortunate ever since after that first incident that I had. I've been successfully found doctors and care teams that have indulged me a little bit, right? Because I like to be informed. I like to do my own research. Zero helps me do that, right? Any of the other organizations that we partner with in Zero, the Prostate Cancer Foundation, right? VPCA, there's a lot of groups out there. You can do a lot of good in educating yourself, and then you can go to your doctor armed with information to ask them about. Instead of just saying, hey, what's up with trials, right? You can say, listen, for my type of cancer, for my stage of cancer, these are some of the trials that I researched that might be available to me. Can you comment on them? And can you tell me whether you think that they would be good in my situation or not?
I think we did see in the survey that among veterans with prostate cancer, those patient groups you mentioned were some of the best sources of information for them. There are others, but and there are some plain language summaries of medical journals. There are some other online patient resources, but those patient education groups that also tend to have support services incorporated or support groups and kind of build communities and networks, those really do seem to be some of the best tools for patients to use.
Yeah, and we have that available at Zero, right?
Yep.
If you are really, if you're a prostate cancer patient or a caregiver and frustrated about which direction you should go, or even where to go to find good information, then you can contact Zero, and Zero has a network of peers who can reach out to them. I'm one of them for Zero. And where you can talk to other men or caregivers and get good advice or get pointed in the right direction from someone that's been there, right? Has walked the same journey as you. Veterans are great at that, right? Veterans, veterans are like one big family, right? So it's sort of a family within a family even. I love my Zero family, but the Brotherhood of Arms and veterans across the country take great pride in helping other veterans. And, I think that there are people that you should be talking to get some advice and figure out how to walk this journey. You don't have to do it by yourself.
And, I think, Paul, you're a mentor in our mentor program. which also has a caregiver mentor program alongside it. We also have support groups, and some of those support groups are located at military bases and specifically work with active duty military or veterans. We also have, some supports that can help you deal with the very real life logistical implications of dealing with prostate cancer, right? People in the survey reported financial barriers. They reported problems getting a second opinion, figuring out how to use their insurance. All of that stuff is the kind of thing that our 0360 program can really help provide people with 360-degree patient support for the nuts and bolts of life, right, that might
Right.
be put on hold.
Navigating TRICARE, right? Or the VA system is something that, if you don't have another source of advice, call zero, right? Connect with someone like me who can point you in the right direction. I think the thing is, don't try to do it yourself. Don't just get on Google and start trying to research, because there's a lot of information out there. And frankly, like anything, there's good information and there's bad information. And I think that organizations like Zero can really help a lot. And, I'm a personal example of that, right? Because I was involved with Zero early on in my after diagnosis and my treatment regimen the whole time. And I have availed myself of those opportunities through Zero and surrounded myself with people that have been in this fight for even longer than I have. And it's great for me emotionally, but it's also great for me just in terms of understanding the resources that are available to me and the treatment options for sure.
Paul, you have been a really great advocate, I think, for your own care, right? You made choices, you changed doctors when you needed to, you pivoted. And 64% of our survey respondents said they wouldn't change anything about their treatment journey. And the things that people tended to say they would change kind of related to getting more information, right? Did they know enough to understand their treatment options? And I think more importantly, the implications of those treatment options, right? What the side effects might be, what they might expect for success, that kind of thing. And then the other category was bedside manner. I think that was the other single biggest piece that people would have changed about their journeys. And in the end, we're talking about people who didn't feel like their care team gave them the information or empathy they needed. They couldn't find a second opinion. And that's really important, I think, for most people. And it was interesting. I was speaking to a veteran recently who suggested there might be an element or two of military culture at play here, right? The idea that you don't question a superior officer, and your doctor in many ways here is your superior officer. And secondly, the idea of bootstrapping, right? That you don't complain, just get through it, move on. And I admire the concept, but it probably doesn't serve you all that well in getting the treatments and support you need. And I think that there's something in your experience that really speaks to that, Paul. I mean, you really did go in and solve problems. And when they weren't being solved appropriately, you came up with a plan B and you moved on it.
I think that's right. 64, first off, I'm encouraged that 64% have had a positive experience with their care team. That's, there's a lot of work to do, but that's a good number. Because we're doing some things with Zero and other advocacy groups designed to, improve that experience with the VA, with other providers of veterans. And that's part of the reason why we did the survey, was we want to find out where the gaps are so that we can continue to improve care, or regardless of where veterans are treated. But 64% is a pretty good number. But I do agree that there is an element to military culture that where people don't ask for help, where people think that they can go it alone, right? And I think vets are strong people; they can rise above that. I could see some of that in myself. One of the things that I'm personally very appreciative of is that I had my wife, right, who could smack me on the back of the head from time to time and say, if she saw that impulse in me, right? No, we're going to go do this. We're going to go we're going to ask that question again to the doctor because I'm not really sure we like that answer. Or we are going to go for a second opinion someplace else, right? Because, oh, by the way, your insurance covers that. And not a lot of people realize that, right? If you don't necessarily have a spouse or someone close there, a support group can provide a lot of that, that wrap around, right? That support that can encourage you to sort of get outside of that rigidity that sometimes comes with the military service, the mentality that goes along with that. Other vets, right? Talk to other vets. That's why it's super helpful as we reach out to the broader Zero family and all the people that they know, is we want new people in our fold, right? We want new champions. We want people we want veterans, we want their caregivers, we want their family members, we want people that know them to come into the fold of this great big advocacy family that we have, because we're going to pull down some of those walls, right? When we do that, just through, all of the support and love and concern that comes from being part of a larger entity here.
And we want people to get involved. I'm dying to have more people involved in our veterans efforts. So, visit zerocancer.org/veterans. Send an email to veterans@zerocancer.org, and we can help figure out how we can serve you. We can help empower you to serve the rest of the veterans community. We've got things we can do for you, and we've got things you can do for other vets with prostate cancer. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to have a conversation about all of these things. Thank you so much, Paul, for your time today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody watching. We're going to have a deep dive webinar on this topic later in December. And I hope you'll all join us again. We'll go into all of the statistics and details. Do reach out to us if you're interested in getting involved. And we're going to drop a link in the chat right now. You can sign a petition today. It takes less than 30 seconds to support legislation to improve prostate cancer care for veterans. It's really easy. Paul's been working on this all along, and it's a small thing you can do at this exact moment as part of the team.
We're making progress. Come help us. That's, the message I would leave with y'all. Veterans and their families and their caregivers are doers, right? That's the one thing that I know about this community. And, we want you to come help us change this equation, right? Get the word out, advocate, so that we can see a world where, we cure prostate cancer. And, even if we don't cure it, we find it early enough so that it's not it's not a problem for men, right? They can live their whole life with prostate cancer as opposed to worrying about all the things that come with a poor diagnosis. So, come help us. It's great. Zero is an awesome organization, and we'd be happy to have you.
We're here to end prostate cancer, right? We are here to end prostate cancer, and we need your help in the fight. So thank you, Paul, for your service. Thank you to all of our veterans who are watching for their service. Tomorrow is Veterans Day. We hope you'll take advantage of the opportunity to say thank you, and also to tell a veteran. Tell them about their possible risk for prostate cancer. Tell them what they ought to know. Tell them how to take care of themselves. Share the information, and then come back and hang out with us. Do some more. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.
See ya.